I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Well, it's a good year to be a conspiracy theorist. I had to say it. Welcome back to the show. Welcome to the show in general, I guess you could say. We got a good one planned for you. We're going to do a conspiracy roundtable here, and I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves. We'll start with Andrew because you're new to the channel. Andrew, thanks for coming on. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm Andrew from 6G Agenda. For those who don't know, first time checking you out and being on here. It's great to meet you. Great to see you, Ben, as well. We do some bangers. We have a great time. So yeah, I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah. Ben, plug your stuff, man.
Yeah, Ben from End of the World News. Once again, thank you for having me on there. I'm excited to talk with you gentlemen about the topic that is taking over the world, the Epstein files. You can find me at End of the World News on Instagram, End of the World News on Spotify or iTunes for my weekly podcast. And then I also upload the video to YouTube, and that's End of the Worlds with an S News.
Cool. Again, really happy to have you guys on here. I've seen both of you on shows before talking about this topic and other similar topics. So I'm really excited to get into it. And I'll just start it off with this. I've seen some of the files at this point. I tried to get as caught up as I could for this show. And I would say where I'm at with it right now, this is a glimpse into the behind the scenes world that I'm always talking about on my show. The people who run the world, what they're up to, what they're really up to. And this is all very revealing. My question is this the great reckoning of our time? You know, what's this going to look like as soon as the slowest boomers kind of catch on to this? I had a conversation with NDS recently, and they said something to the effect of, what's this going to look like when your parents or your grandparents know and are talking about the Epstein files? When Fox News starts to treat it seriously, what's it going to look like for the country? Because I see how it looks now, but I'm on Instagram, I'm not on Facebook. So, when the boomers catch this and start talking about it, maybe they already have. What do you guys think is the paradigm shifting?
Go ahead, Andrew. Take this one and I'll follow up.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what they're building up to is the critical mass aspect to this. Slow drip, you do a little bit at a time. 10 years ago, us guys were getting into it and we were like, hey, listen, they're, doing all this crazy stuff on an island, whatever. And people kind of scoffed. Oh, it's just one guy by himself. As time went on, now we get more revelations. And I think that, yeah, they're building to a critical mass. And honestly, I think they're hitting us from all angles with all the other things going on. And they want to get us, the demoralization campaign to get us to lose hope and overthrow our government, et cetera, et cetera. The internationalists want no nations, and we got to get rid of ours.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this is a piece of a greater agenda, which is the manufacturing of prophecy. And I liken this to the great false awakening, right? So people think they're going to get justice. Finally, the truth is coming to the, surface. But ultimately, what this is meant for is a controlled transition into the B system, into the one world technocratic government. Because in order for the people to accept your new system, what do you have to do first? They have to reject the old one. And when presented with the opportunity of a government ran by pedophiles or a government ran by AI, at some point, what are people going to choose? Now, the joke's on everybody because the pedophiles own the AI.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is why I wanted to have you guys on, so we could get into it. And building to critical mass is something I heard there. I think, Ben, we were talking before, we were talking about coming up to a pinnacle. I would throw in the word singularity, perhaps. I've talked about the technocracy a lot lately. Hurtling towards something in the future. And that's why I want to get you guys on to kind of hash this out as well and jump into different theories. You said, Andrew, the internationalists want no nations.
Yes.
And I wanted to bring that up because it kind of reminded me of something I also talked to Ben about. recently and before the show, which is like, you know, this idea of for lack of a better term, hurling us into a civil war. What do you guys think? Is that where are we with that? Is it right around the corner or what?
Yeah, that's what I meant by the all angles aspect, right?
Mm.
So you've got, yesterday I was actually going into all this where New York, you've got a group of Muslims that are saying, I've seen videos on Instagram saying that, we're taking over New York. He's like, I'm here to let them know we are taking over. And then the same day, you have a video come out with a guy walking down with a picket fence calling for a revolution because of the Epstein files. And the same day, I see Chicago. People are calling for the government because of this group of gangsters with ARs and stuff taking over whole blocks. So, yes, I think that with the Minnesota, we're building up with Mexico, the cartel. You think there's sleeper cells from Iran here. Imagine all the people from the cartels right in our neighborhood, right? Literally, they're our neighbors. So I think that, yeah, they're building up to literally destruction. As he's talking about, it's this manufacturing of Armageddon prophecy to usher in this new world order, which is the beast system, if you look at it biblically. Otherwise, yeah, it's just this Illuminati old assassin order that's always been internationalist, no religion, no nation. They're just kind of globalists, as Alex Jones calls.
Yeah, Ben, I'll let you jump on this. I just want to say real quick, I saw that there's this cartel war breaking out in Mexico right now in Guadalajara, and I just think it's interesting that Guadalajara was like the testing grounds, as it were, for the Rockefellers recently in a case I was looking into with their Resilient Cities project, Smart Cities. They were going around the world and testing these out, as we know they did in like the Hawaii Maui thing. That seemed to be a smart city op, if you ask me. They were also doing that in Guadalajara, and just today I saw that there's a cartel war breaking out there, and that's projected to be a smart city. So I have to say that those two are related, but that's
Yeah.
just a side tangent. Ben, you can hop on here.
Well, on a side tangent, just to go into what's happening in Mexico, I know last time I was on your show, I believed I was talking about the cover of The Economist and how it predicted 2026 and all that chaos that was encompassed by a soccer ball that was being kicked. And where is the World Cup being held this year? Well, it's being held in North America, so Canada, United States, and Mexico. And what a perfect way to create tension and chaos leading up to that. Because remember, problem, reaction, solution. And in this case, I think the solution is going to be technocracy, the technocracy map, right? We're going to encompass all these different countries into one of the 10 regional trading centers or the 10 kings, I think, that arise in this manufacturing of prophecy. And as far as the Epstein files about building it to a critical mass, once again, you don't have to believe the words on the page, but the powers and principalities, these fallen gods and demons, and these Babylonian bloodlines that are direct descendants of them do. And in their interpretation of prophecy, all the nations turn on Israel. So right now they are manufacturing the consent. Remember, they play us like a video game, right? Straight up. And they put new data points in our hard drives. And then they use those influencers to kind of curate the way they want us to feel. And that's what's happening because for the first time in a long time, with this kind of like, and I don't want to say boogeyman because Epstein was real, it's connected to Mossad, but we are attributing all the world's evils to this one organization, which is kind of scapegoating this idea of it's all Israel, and the nations and the people for the first time in a long time are starting to change how they view that, what's it called, country or state. So I think ultimately it's going to lead into this final war. I guess you'd call the war of Gog and Magog, that last 7 years, where there's this all-out battle of Armageddon.
Yeah. And Ben, I want to give you a chance at some point today later if you want to maybe really, really hash out the 10 Kings of Prophecy thoughts that you have. The last show we did, we just kept bouncing to other topics and I meant to get around to it then and I just never did. But so today I'd like to, you know, you put that thing entirely on the table at some point today if you want to, man.
Yeah.
And I also want to comment on the intelligence aspect of this. I might warm up some before I just put all this out today, but what I think is going on is a grander conspiracy that's interwoven with intelligence and then intelligence agencies, and I think it goes back to World War II. I think it goes back to the Nazis, and I don't want to get too deep on it this early in the show, but I think that's what's going on with Epstein. I mean, I have pictures of him that I saw with his Saudi passport from the 80s. I mean, the guy was obviously a double agent. I think he learned a lot of his tricks from the trade being intelligence and government and government intelligence agencies. So, and a lot of people have been denying this. A lot of people have been denying that, and that these files are really a thing. That people in office are in the files. I see people denying that, or they were. Hopefully, they're still not. So, I'll just wrap it up with this. I think it's time to get a little preachy here. I think it's time we stop putting our faith in politicians. I shouldn't have to say that, or anybody. So I
Oh yeah,
think these files are very revealing.
man. I think you're hitting it on the head. So with intelligence, we could lay out some of this background. So with Epstein, I mean, besides the fact that his mentor is Robert Maxwell, who has a three-way tie with intelligence, MI6, CIA, Mossad. I mean, I think he got killed because he got caught bugging a room, if I'm not mistaken, of a politician, and then he falls off of his yacht, right? And I think that that's a big reason why Epstein wasn't a huge fan of going to Israel. If I was to spectate, because in his emails he does say anywhere but Israel, I don't want to go there. I don't think it means that he wasn't working with the Mossad and Ehud Barak, etc. But I think that there's a lot to it, because again, I don't think it boils down to Israel as Ben was saying. I think this is an internationalist group that works through the intelligence agencies, through the Bilderberg Group, through the Trilateral Commission, which the Rockefeller, I forgot which Rockefeller, had Epstein join. And he talks about this in his interview with Steve Bannon, how he joined the Trilateral Commission, I want to say in the beginning of his career. He was fresh out of Dalton. And so he's kind of building up with, rubbing shoulders with these guys, and kind of, we know that the family of the Rockefellers has invested heavily with MK Ultra, the CIA. So there's always been these ties. So then later you see that Epstein bought or sold, or both, the plane that was being used for Iran-Contra. There was a time where he was kind of MIA, and I think that was in the 80s. I think he had a lot to do with the drug smuggling that was going between Israel for the cocaine, etc. Well, guess who else had ties to the Iran-Contra affair, who also was a Satanist sexual predator?
Oh,
Michael Aquino. And this guy, who was tied to the Franklin scandal, another situation very similar to Epstein, where you have elites that are playing, doing things with kids. You have call boys going to the White House, etc. And everywhere you look in these stories, you see people with satanic rituals, SRA, going on with children, as well as, pornography, all that. And so I think it's just one group. It's multi-generational. It goes back to the Nazis, as you said. That's why you see the people that are pushing the accelerationism now are people like Peter Thiel, with ties to like his dad, who was a Nazi scientist, or J.D. Vance, who's Skull and Bones, which I don't know if you know this, but Prescott Bush funded the Nazis through the Deutsche Bank, who he was Skull and Bones. So there's all these ties. It's multi-generational, secret societies, Bilderberg groups. They work through the global entities like that. And yeah, I think that guy definitely had some intelligence ties, but it's a lot deeper. I think they just work through intelligence.
yeah, I'm with you. And speaking about mentors, Robert Maxwell was one of them, but so was that guy Adnan Khashoggi, who was a gun runner and a money mover for the elites.
Yes, that was the other guy. Yep.
And Whitney Webb, who I really like, she's like a computer. She might be AI, but she makes the point that maybe they're bringing to light all this pedophile stuff, so we don't actually pay attention to what he did earlier in his career, and that ties to Iran-Contra, ties to moving all this dark money for all these families who the intelligence agencies work for. And I'm with you. It's any country that has an intelligence agency, that intelligence agency works for the bloodline that controls that country. So, and these agencies, sometimes their agendas overlap and sometimes they differ, but I think they all serve the greater agenda. And that's why you see these Epstein tentacles literally in every single country. Yeah, and one thing I also noticed too, as far as just the Epstein list, and I was thinking about this. Well, Who was in charge of releasing the Epstein files and all its redactions and what they gave us and what they didn't give us? Intelligence, right? Whether that was Mossad, CIA, a combination of it too. And at the various highest levels, is there any real difference? But and then you look at what was in it. So the information they released, it was enough to confirm everything we believed. It was enough to bring it into the public psyche for the first time like we've never seen it. But there was absolutely no teeth to have anybody brought to justice. And what it actually confirmed was a lot of the stuff that QAnon first said, going back to, say, Pizzagate and all this terminology, stuff like that. And we know that QAnon was an intelligence agency. So I think they released just enough to get it in the public sphere. And think of it as like a snowball. You know, you send it down a mountain and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And this, international Zio cartel, and they're all part of it, is going to continue to operate, going against the will of the people. And this idea is going to be percolating and percolating and percolating. And to the point it gets so big, maybe they release a few more files, that I think it's just going to explode. And that's when we really have to worry, is when the full Epstein files come out, because at that point, there's no pulling back the agenda. The old system is going to be destroyed, and they're going to usher in this new system.
Okay, so they put it in the public sphere. That's what we're going through now. And ultimately, this is like a Trojan horse of chaos. It's just going to tear down the new system and bring the new one in. Interesting. I do want to comment on the clandestine aspect to this. Andrew, you said this is an internationalist group. I agree. Ben, you said this is an intel group that works for bloodlines traditionally. I agree. I think, well, I'll just tell you how deep I think the rabbit hole goes here. I think, like I said before, Epstein was intel in the 80s, maybe even before that. I think he got good at being a double agent. I think he got good at being slippery. I think he got so deep in the spy game that he bottomed out on the bottom layer of that world, which I see being created by the Nazis. At least the modern inception of how to do clandestine activities all go back to the Nazis. They, after the war, they spread out and they kept their spy network, and they started working for hire for governments and oligarchs and people of importance everywhere, bloodlines, governments. Our CIA comes from Alan Dulles working with Hitler's old spy master. They started the OSS and then they crafted that into the CIA. I think Epstein got in with that legacy, and he got in with very rich and forces that are unknown largely to the public. And I think this is the conspiracy theory part. Okay, I think more than likely this represents a breakaway civilization of rich elites. Now they might be coming and going back and forth, but ultimately they've figured out and set up an infrastructure for a proper breakaway civilization. I think the Nazis helped lay the framework for that, honestly. And in fact, I think it was likely established by a rich runaway group of Nazis, because we know they went to South America and various other places. Well, they went there with billions. Some researchers have said billions. Certainly millions. I mean, they robbed Europe. They robbed all of Europe. These guys had money, right? So basically, I think Epstein's blackmail library benefited the people who are involved with this breakaway society and their sex trafficking ops and their sex trafficking needs and all their needs for trafficking, whatever, whether it's drugs or all the other nasty stuff that might get me kicked off YouTube. So as crazy as that sounds, I think that's what's going on. I think you can go listen to the Michael Herrera story and ask yourself, who's he talking about? Who could have that? Who was that actually? Who could have it been? So, what are they really up to, right? And where do you think Epstein got his eugenics fantasies and aspirations from? So that's just my hunch, and I'll just leave it there on the table.
Oh yeah, I think, man, you read my mind. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it goes back to the Nazis, did they lose? Right? I mean, why was General Patton killed? Right? I mean, they tried to kill him on Hanukkah, it didn't work, so they went to the hospital and killed him on Christmas. He said that we fought the wrong enemy. We need to go after Russia. Well, who was running Russia? The Bolsheviks. These are the same groups, right? The Rothschilds funded the Nazis. The Nazis, Hitler posed as the boogeyman to send Jews down to Israel. A lot of Jews didn't want to go down to Israel. They liked it in Germany. Why would they want to go down to the desert? They weren't trying to go live in the sand. They were enjoying their time in the mountains. And so he had to kind of obviously do that. And I think that a lot of Christians, Jews, Messianic mostly, were killed during that time. But when you look at kind of how it developed afterwards, I think you're exactly right that kind of, America was, I believe, working with the Nazis, even though it was like a controlled opposition situation where we were against. I mean, maybe they were truly against them at some point, but I truly think that there's a lot of real men that died, but people at the top working together. And that's the unfortunate part where you see massive casualty on both sides. But at the top, they're probably doing this to usher in a new country, a new world order, this whole 100-year plan. And then now here we are with the multi-generational families that are up to the same thing. New World Order has been mentioned by Hitler. It was mentioned by Bush, who was the grandson of the person or the son of the person who funded the Nazis. His son, 9/11, I believe, was also a huge step into ushering in what we're talking about, by the way, especially because the day before what you're talking about, $22 trillion went missing. And then you have Catherine Austin Fitts saying that money went to building underground tunnels, a breakaway civilization. And then you have 9/11 the next day. And you have, again, the same kind of usual characters. Larry Finkelstein, Larry Silverstein's never called in. He doesn't go into work that day. So again, it's kind of this behind. And by the way, the Bushes and the Bin Ladens had a long history of working together with their oil and the CIA situation, because there's something that happened with Operation Cyclone, where the Bin Ladens were put up against the Russians in the 90s to kind of win against the Soviets. And so that was a multi-generational Bush and Bin Laden kind of connection that then you see 9/11, ushers in the police state. It helps Israel stabilize the Middle East. That then ushers in this, what Ben's talking about with the prophetic building of the greater Israel, which is the old Jerusalem, right? So all these things were in, by the way, the Rothschilds started this in the, when they started the war with the Nazis in World War II. They knew that they needed to build Israel to do all of this. So yes, to your point, I think the breakaway civilization, and I think also with what Ben's saying, I think it's all hand in hand. It's very wild.
Well, interesting you brought up Catherine Austin Fitts. And then after that, she actually came to the conclusion that they've stolen $21 trillion.
Yeah, I almost said that, but I didn't want to I thought it was that. Okay.
Yeah. So when Rumsfeld came out, he said 2 trillion. And then she did some work with a professor from Michigan State University. And they came to the conclusion that they actually stole 21 trillion. And this was all black ops stuff to build underground, according to her, underground bases. So breakaway civilization, are they going to Mars? No. I think they're going to go underground to try to avoid the apocalypse.
Yes. And also, real quick, the Bank of International Settlements, Hitler didn't go after Switzerland. He said he was going after the banks. He said he was going to, go after all the banks and everything. He doesn't go after the Bank of International Settlements, which makes all of this possible. They're able to move billions of dollars off of the record. This is how you make this happen.
Sorry. It's interesting. You know whose money went to Switzerland? The Knights Templars. You know who took over for the Knights Templars? The Rothschilds. Their name was originally the Bowers, and they're part of the Holy Roman Empire. Just look at their flag on their symbol. It's right there in the center.
Reinhard Galen was stored a lot of his riches and files and stuff in Switzerland after the war. He was going back and forth. He had a stash up there in the mountains.
Yes. I believe what's his name went there too, that worked with Hitler. Starts with a B. He was the guy that was kind of really the one with all the money, plundering all the money. A lot of his family went to Switzerland. People talk about Argentina, but what about the families that went over there? That's supposed to be where all of them kind of like the main elite ones went. Just a theory.
Mm-hmm. And Galen, I'm sorry, Ben, real quick. Yeah. Galen was the spy master I was talking about earlier who helped set up our CIA. So go ahead, though, Ben.
Well, just to touch on this idea that, Hitler was basically an agent of the cabal. I mean, I know there were emails released between Rothschild and Epstein, where Rothschild brought up that they actually housed Hitler in one of their hostels when he was young. And there's also that idea that he might be the bastard child of one of the Rothschilds. We know that these bloodlines, they have breeding programs. They marry into royalty, royalty marry amongst other royalty. That's how they keep it all in the family. So yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think all these people work together. Intelligence is kind of the front because behind that are these ancient families.
Hmm. It's interesting. I think that we're getting on World War II today, which is not something I had planned, but I'm very happy that we are. And I think Martin Bormann is one of the guys who
That's it.
yeah, he made it to South America with billions. And I don't know, he probably hopped around as well. I think a lot of these top Nazis like Galen and Bormann and others had their own little spy networks that they helped curate. And I don't have my research in front of me for all this. It's something I looked into a while back. I'm a little bit rusty on it, but when I looked, I found 4 Nazi global spy networks that started up and business was booming for them right after the war because these guys slipped right under the radar. Like we slipped Galen in over here. They went over there and ripped him out of the Nuremberg trial. Said, no, you can't, don't put this guy in front of the cameras and a judge. Like we're taking him. They brought him, they put him in a van, made him made a kind of a spectacle out of it, made it look like they were going to like, oh, we're throwing him in the van, we're carting him off to jail. What they did was they took him to a tailor, got him a suit, and got him a stateside as soon as possible, and they start setting up our spy network. I love this kind of stuff. But yeah, it just goes to show you, man, like I think the true origins of this did happen in the 40s. I mean, I've said it before. I think through a we stepped into a new era in 1947 specifically. We crossed the threshold as humans. Ties in with our technology too. And I think it's interesting that, we're talking about the pinnacle and building to critical mass. And the word that the elites are throwing around for that is singularity. I've used it too, but it works. And it's Ray Kurzweil's thing. And he starts his graph, the where technology started and where it's going and where it is now. So and it goes from the Nazis in the 40s, maybe the late 30s, till now. And it's a perfect incline because
You know,
they built the first computer, they released the first TV at the Olympics, they built the first particle collider with Ralph Widerow. They had all these crazy missiles. They had missiles that were scaring the British. They thought it was magic because they were like self-guided or whatnot.
It
So
was.
yeah, all this stuff, and it's a perfect incline till now. It's like we've been put on some sort of I won't go that deep in it. I'm gonna let you guys talk, but I just think it's interesting that we're talking World War II today. I think we're right
well,
on the mark.
I'd like to say one thing and let Andrew go. One thing I always found interesting about Hitler is that he promised 1,000-year Reich, right? Well, it comes after the last 7 years, the 1,000-year millennial reign, right? This was a complete counterfeit or a mimicking of Christ's 1,000-year reign after this. And I wonder if each generation has like an antichrist in waiting, someone that's connected to these bloodlines, so that if they can follow through with the plan, they got somebody ready to go. And I think that Hitler was that generation. And we'll see who the new one. We'll find it. We'll find out if Peter Thiel actually finds out who the Antichrist is. He might be somewhere up in Greenland. But
Yeah. And we're on the precipice of the well-known 80-year cycle, right? And 80 years ago was 1947. And so, yeah, we're kind of right on time for a major war. I think that we're talking about World War II kind of for a reason, because I do think that these wars are used to they're used as stepping stones. I don't think that we're done. And I think we're about right there at the next stepping stone launching pad, if you will. There's a lot of weird, these people like to use mysticism, the occult. We know that the Nazis were big into the occult. I think that's a big reason why they had a lot of that technology come out of there. I think that's why it was likened to magic. And I think it probably was very much, like Sam says, hardwired mysticism. But as you fast forward, yeah, I think that they like to use a lot of astrological things to go on as well. And right now we're kind of in the middle of a major one. And man, I've just never seen it. I mean, the psyops are crazy. I've never seen it at this level before with the Epstein, the cartels, everything else that's going on at this very moment. I just think that, they're building up for that war. They got the fleet over there in Iran. I think that we might be honestly stepping into the end game as far as, ushering what people have been, spectating for over 30 years.
Yeah, a good point there is that some of it was magic. I mean, I believe that. I've studied this enough to where that's the conclusion that I have arrived at with the Nazis, especially. This all came out of the Nazi thing was an occult thing. You trace the origins of the Thule Society. It was an amalgamation of all these different occult orders. Many you probably heard of, some you probably haven't. And it was what was the guy's name? The two guys in that Thule Society. I'll think of it later. But these two guys, Walter Neuhaus and Rudolf von Sabbatendorf,
Mm.
these two guys were in all these other occult orders. They were, highfalutin German occultists. They came together, brought all these influences together, brought all these teachings together, took all the mysticism that they knew and combined it into what is known as the Thule Society. That society morphed into this subtle, at first, political engine. Then it turned into the German Workers' Party, which then turned into the Nazi Party, to the point where the Nazis didn't, Hitler did not pull that swastika out of thin air. He kept it because the Thule Society was already using it. They just had the bent edges. Hitler comes in and straightens them out, puts a little propaganda flair on there, changes the color scheme up, the black, red, and white, and they just simply kept it. And the 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 German party magazine or newsletter, the Reich newsletter, was also kept from the Thule Society. Like they just kind of came in and built on the foundation that the occult had already laid at that point. And I mean, this just goes crazy from here. That's just like the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. And I was looking at the occult ties to Epstein here as well, because first of all, I think what you see with clandestine agencies and the occult is ties that go way back. Um, I'm thinking about John Dee. He was the first 007.
Mhm.
Blavatsky, Crowley was certainly involved with Intel, and there's all this crazy stuff around Epstein too with that. I think him being a spy taps directly into that, and also there's all these pictures of Epstein wearing. That's one thing I want to talk about today. Is like I went through and looked at all these pictures because, they do sort of tell a lot. What is the phrase? Worth 1,000 words, right? And I think that's true with some of these pictures. There's photos of Epstein wearing all these obscure, sort of traditional, cultural looking outfits from places around the world. I think that's a shamanic thing. And I think that that's a CIA, for lack of a better word, thing. It's an intel thing, right? I suspect he had magical purposes in mind when he was wearing that. That's just my suspicion. And I think this parallels just being a spy traditionally, just that those ties with the occult. Also, the temple of his that he had. Um, I think they said that when they got to the temple, everybody knows the one with the blue stripes on it. They said there was just a bed in there. I First of all, I think it's weird that there's a bed in the temple. Second of all, I think, oh, sex magic. What else was he doing with this, right? It's a temple with a bed. You take the occult and you combine it with what these guys are obsessed with, which is sex, and you put those together, and I mean, that's got to be what it is. He was driven by sex, and I'm sure he was aware of the occult applications to that. So, I'll just leave it at that for now. But I think that there's a lot of interesting ties to the occult, and
Well, I think
yeah.
I think the occult is huge, right? Because the one thing that we know about these bloodlines is that they worship these fallen gods, and the occult is the religion of these fallen gods, this mysticism, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, I believe that this entire technological revolution that we've seen for the past 200 to 300 years, and maybe 1947 has really kicked it off. It's 100% inspired by the occult. I truly believe that. I wonder where we get our ideas from. Right? There's a reason why in the Bible it says we should take every thought captive because we don't know where it comes from. And I wonder if these people who made these major technological breakthroughs were actually inspired by these demonic entities, giving them the information that they needed. I always talk about this story, maybe I've done before, but I'm going to say it anyways. The godfather of supercomputing, Seymour Cray, who was an engineer, and his work essentially took the huge IBM computers and turned it into the personal computer. Well, he's quoted multiple times in saying, whenever there was a problem that he couldn't solve, he would go underneath his house, start digging in his tunnel, and the elves would come out and give him the answer. This idea that he was channeling this information from some type of entity outside of this realm seems very occult. So yeah, I think it's and when these bloodlines pull from the intelligence agencies, right? Because I don't think everybody in the intelligence agency is bad. I think there's a lot of people who think they're actually doing their jobs, but at the very upper echelon, I think part of what draws them in is this curiosity of the cult, the power that you derive from channeling these supernatural beings. So I think it goes hand in hand with what we're seeing today.
Yeah, man, I got a lot on this. I'm trying to figure out how to lay it out at this point. Okay, so with the Nazis and everything, right? What did he espouse the most? It was the Aryan kind of race, right? This idea of Atlantis, that they go back to Atlantis. So recently I've been kind of reading. Now, this is kind of crazy. This is a theory that I've kind of been dwelling on in the past 20 minutes. So Tyre, right? Tyre in the Bible. I want to ask Ben this. It's looked at as like the equivalent to Atlantis. I've read some stuff that kind of said that. Now, if that was the case, we know that Tyre, wives were taken from Tyre with Solomon, who built the temple. And we know that that relates with this whole idea of, the Zionist regime that came out of the Hitler situation. We also know that you were mentioning shaman and the intelligence mixing together. Well, I think that the Freemasons, which, by the way, the red, black, and white, that's Freemasonic colors. I think Hitler changed it to that for that reason. You also have the shamanic Aryan Atlantis aspect, which is really just this old Babylonian ritualistic pagan, kind of practices, right? Which I think that, yeah, that's kind of the core of it. And the Kabbalah is kind of the study of that. So then you have the Kabbalah that kind of relates into the Zionist stuff that's going on. Fast forward, what is this Zionist Kabbalah practicing? If you listen to a Steve Bannon interview, Epstein, he's got the Zorro Ranch that he buys, where he takes scientists from Los Alamos labs because they're getting rid of scientists. He brings them over there. He's got a major interest in eugenics. The woman who started 23andMe was in the Epstein files. And, you have AI companies getting built and made by the people who started these genetics companies. So they have a clear interest in making a large data of DNA. So they could then use AI to, I guess, contrive it and figure out how to, I don't know, build this super race that Hitler was trying to build. And again, you get the same kind of Epstein wanted to put his seed into everybody. I think that goes into the same kind of Hitlerian idea. And Elon Musk, I think, is doing the same thing.
Oh, without
Yeah.
a doubt. I mean, that's what people think when, Hitler was talking about an Aryan race. He's talking about a white race. No, he's talking about the ancient Atlantis race
Yes.
of the giants, right? That's what he's actually
Exactly.
talking about. Um,
The Nephilim DNA, exactly. That's what
the
they're
Nephilim
looking
DNA,
for. They're
yeah.
looking for that. They want to bring that out, and I think that they want to, I've been mentioning this quantum computing, the whole idea of like quantum in general. What the Manhattan Project. The reason why the Genesis mission says it's the biggest deal since the Manhattan Project, which was all about building a nuclear bomb, which I think was about accessing this quantum realm. That's really all I think it was. And then that's why we see this large influx of UFO sightings and things like that afterwards. Quantum computing, I believe, can access the realm that the soul dwells in, the realm that these fallen angels might be dwelling in. If these are disembodied spirits, these Nephilim, I think that they're trying to build a vessel that could maybe work with it. I think we're finding graphene oxide, nanoparticles, things like that in our body. We're being wired up to be able to kind of symbiotically singularity, be able to take it, join that. And that's kind of what we cover a lot on my show, the 6G Agenda. I think that mysticism, Babylonian, worship, everything Ben talked about, it merges together with this technocratic order in that way. They're trying to bring a vessel and or merge us with it, etc.
The Gordy Rose, right? I was trying to remember the name of his company, but Kindred AI. Gordy Rose and his company, Kindred AI. Gordy has the
Kindred.
contracts with
Kindred
right.
AI.
It's hilarious. Yeah, and he's got contracts with CIA and NASA and CERN
Yes.
They're tapping into something over there for sure. But he said, and I've talked about it on the show, like there's a couple of lectures I went and listened to of his, and he said, my computer, which he lovingly refers to as a black monolith,
Mm,
such as the ones you see in 2001 Space Odyssey. He
yes.
says there's a computer chip in there. He's like, the black monolith keeps the computers cold. It's extra cold. Facilitates an environment for this chip to thrive. And what this chip does is it helps us access this other realm. Now I'm paraphrasing here, but he was saying that they take the information and they put it into the quantum realm and they get answers back, like divination, like a quantum Ouija board. And he says it's out there, it's on the internet, it's on YouTube, anybody can go see it. So when I hear you talking about the quantum realm, I'm like, I'm with you, man. I think you're definitely onto something with that. And going back to Tyre, the Phoenician capital, Phoenicians had Sidon and Tyre, and they were seafaring people. There's a
Yeah.
lot of connections with them and Atlantis and the
Yeah.
legends of Atlantis. They some of them I think even believe that they were descendants of Atlantis, which is a trope that later would be picked up and ran with by the Nazis like crazy. They believe their ancestors went
Exactly.
back to that as
That's why I
well.
brought it up, because Ben on my show last time, he was talking about The Economist, and he pointed out the traders, and I believe he called them Phoenician traders, and they had
Yeah.
these particular hats. And I was looking into Tyre being related to Atlantis, and they had the same hats, and they were like, surrounded, by ports or whatever. There's like it's just how they describe Atlantis. Atlantis had multiple rings until you got to the middle, and it was pretty much barriers, right? And that's how they describe Tyre. And I'm like, man, wouldn't that be crazy? Because Solomon, the temple, they want to build the third temple. That's the whole. So I'm like, wouldn't that be crazy if the whole, Aryan concept that Hitler was espousing at its core was really the same thing as the Zionist, push is going on right now. And by the way, Dan Brown, I think I don't know if that guy's alive or whatever, and he's a famous author, but I'd love to talk to that guy, dude, because he knew something. He wrote the Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons. And at the beginning of Angels and Demons, there was a CERN scientist who dies. And the symbologist, the main character, he comes and he has to decide for the death and everything else. Well, CERN, by the way, I mentioned the 23andMe chick, her dad worked at CERN. And so, 23, yeah, that's a whole thing, because there's people that talk about. I was on Nephilim Death Squad the other day, and he talked about people who studied like schizophrenics, people who had entities coming in them, and they only exhibited 23 archetypes. And I was like, man, isn't that funny? They call that 23andMe. And then you just mentioned another AI company called Kindred AI, like Kindred Spirits. I just think that they're doing this game right in front of our eyes. And yeah, Dan Brown, with the whole CERN thing, you had Opus Dei that was connected as the main like Illuminati arm of that movie. And Peter Thiel, wouldn't you know it, he's like best buddies with the guy who started Opus Dei. So I just think it all connects. Dan Brown knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I just want to say too, I'll let you have it, Ben, but Dan Brown, and this is not to discredit him. He's put a lot of information out, and I think a lot of that information is correct. I don't necessarily agree with all his theories of what or his translations of the info, but that anyway. All that being said, he did work. Dan Brown has serious CIA ties. That's for another
Okay, so he knows
show.
he's an insider. Okay,
He's
so
an
that's the
insider.
answer. So he's either
Yeah.
an insider or he figured it out himself, and there you go, you answered. Okay.
Yeah, and also to something you said there, and I think maybe this is what you were alluding to, but yeah, the Phoenicians and the king of Tyre helped Solomon build the temple.
That's exactly
That's
right.
what
And
you're
that's why I
saying,
think,
right?
and that's why I was explaining that if that was Atlantis, and we know the Zionists want to build the third temple, we know this all extends, and this is the whole idea of the Aryan race with Hitler. It all kind of comes together in that light when you look at Tyre is Atlantis, kind of, because you get more history if you look into the Bible. Where did the people of Tyre go then after that? And I feel like you could get context to the story now if we really start looking at it that way. So, yeah, I want to see what
Well,
you guys thought about that.
well, I would say definitely that the people of Tyre definitely have the same practices of the people of Atlantis.
Mm.
And if you want to tie Atlantis into end times and into the 10 kings, it's really interesting. So the Bible says it will be like the days of Noah in the final generation. Well, that's hundreds of years before the flood, and that's 100 years after the flood. And before the flood was the days of Atlantis. It's just a secular way, or I don't know, Atlantean mythos, but it's describing the same time period. Now, what's interesting, you know how many kings were in Atlantis? 10, right?
X.
Do you know what occultists call what's it called? Atlantis? The golden age. What
Mhm.
does Trump call this current age we're in? The
Mhm.
golden age.
And when was the days of Noah? Genesis 6, the 6G mission, right?
There you go.
6G mission, Genesis mission.
So
And what
I
are
think
they building their new building on the White House in the parameters of Solomon?
Archibald. Yeah, the Archibald. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was thinking the Archibald. My apologies.
yeah. But you see them bringing back, and what they want to do is they want to bring back the days of Atlantis, which again has the 10 kings that, Revelations talks about, that there's 10 kings that come to power, and then they give their power to the beast. Now, the Club of Rome has also talked about this as well. Back in the 70s, they were talking about how they wanted to break the world into 10 trading regions. So I have to think that the Club of Rome's plans for the earth directly lines up with this, prophecy of the 10 kings controlling their 10 regions, which goes back to Atlantis, where they had 10 kings as well. So I think that's how it comes full circle to where we are today. And like I said, they all work together, right? I mean, and this is what I tell people, whether you're Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, or you're Japanese or whatever you are, guess what? Your bloodline that claims to represent you, the powers that be, they don't. And behind closed doors, they're really all these dark art sorcerers, probably all connected to Epstein. And they're trying to manufacture all of this while feeding a BS narrative to the people.
And one of the other things that Gordy Rose said in his lectures was he talked about how they made contact, again, paraphrasing here, but they established some sort of a connection and with these what he called old ones, these entities, out celestial entities. I don't know what they are. Yeah, extra dimensional, or maybe they're quantum realm entities. Well, I don't know what we're gonna call them, but and he likened them to the old ones that Lovecraft talked about. And according to him, they've made contact. And it just reminds me again of Tyre, where I think it's the legend in Tyre. It's they have an Oannes like legend there. I think that's Dagon there, where this entity comes out of the sea after a cataclysm or a great deluge and teaches the people mystery traditions. And there's a lot of connections with that in Atlantis. But I wanted to ask, while we're on this metaphysical stuff here, Dan, you've got the 10 kings of Atlantis. Andrew, I've heard you mention a 100-year plan, which I wanted to circle back to and ask you about. And I heard you mention an 80-year cycle. So I'm very curious about those two things and how they might fit in with this general metaphysical conversation we're having here.
Well, it's kind of as simple as World War One was what, 1917, right? So over 100 years ago, I believe World War One, two, and three were pre-planned. The Albert Pike letter was discredited by calling it a hoax, but I think that they do that a lot. The Antonia plan, same thing. It's not real, but it seems to be happening. Same thing with the Protocols of Zion. Well, that's
whoever wrote it, it might not have been Albert Pike, but whoever wrote it knew exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah. And what they do is they tend to tell you exactly what their plan is and then discredit their own documents that way. But then you see everything in the plan happening right before your eyes and you're supposed to just ignore it because, well, that's not real. No, they do that in front of your eyes. And it's called the, what is it? The law, the Camdenia law or something. There's like a law that they have to tell you to get their karma on you. Because if you see it, well, now the karma's on you because you're choosing not to do anything about it, right? If they believe in this universal law of karma, which they do, because I think that there are universal. Here's the thing about the Luciferian philosophy. You can prove a lot of their stuff because there are universal laws that we live in. And the whole thing with the mystery traditions, the forbidden knowledge, I believe it's the creator's architect, his architecture. They call their God, the architect of the universe. I believe that's because he creates nothing, but he applies the logic behind the creation. So he can tell you the chemistry. He could tell you the geometry. He could show you the Fibonacci sequence. And you can see the macro, micro, and think that you understand the nature of the universe. But in reality, you're not the creator, right? So you're not really at that level. But that's how they manipulate people into thinking that they're powerful. And so I think that that's very important to remember, too, with this. And also, with CERN again, you have Abaddon that gets mentioned in the Bible as being the equivalent of Apollyon or Apollo. Well, the Apollo cult is like the whole seminar and ceremony they did outside of CERN was a Apollo cult ceremony. And I believe that they're even like on a mountain that relates to like Mount Hermon. So it all goes back to the same thing, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and Ben, we've talked about this. I know we at least alluded to it on a show we did, which is that when they were digging the tunnels for CERN, because the particle collider needs a big circular tunnel that is, it benefits from having a lot of acreage. They have to put those things deep underground on a lot of land. And when they were at some point when they're building that tunnel, they came across an old temple to Apollo.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah, that's what it was. I think I did. That might have been what I heard.
Yeah.
What I find interesting, though, is that in the center of CERN is a statue of Shiva the Destroyer. And then when you go and look at the original Manhattan Project, when they were developing the nuclear bomb, didn't Oppenheimer also quote Shiva the Destroyer? I am the destroyer of worlds, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have this occult riddled within, or these fallen gods riddled within, the mythos of all the major technological breakthroughs. It's nuts when you see it.
If I may, just because we're talking so much about CERN, I'm like, well, this is supposed to be about Epstein, right? Let's see if there's any of that in the Epstein files. You get how many hits do we get? I mean, multiple pages of hits where he's talking about people speaking at CERN that he's connected to. A reminder, Lawrence Krauss is going to be at CERN on the 29th. So, he's got connections with people that speak at CERN. I think that this is one, again, it's all the same people.
Yeah, I've got a file I want to show here soon that I found with the Epstein file. So yeah, let's get back into the files for a second here. I'll start with this. I think it's obvious that there's coded language all throughout these files. And I think that boils down to the stuff that they were talking about. They never wanted to see the light of day. They don't want to see the inside of a jail or a courtroom over what they're talking about. So they have coding that they use, because what they're engaged in is reputation destroying activity. And when you read through these files and you see stuff like the maps were upset today, they're not talking about a roadmap. That's code for something probably with human emotions. Grape soda, pizza, jerky, whoops. Obviously is something they're talking about is bad enough that it cannot be written or spoken about over a device. This is stuff to do with, I think, with murder, with RAPE, with child stuff, because also I think the word grape sounds like the other word I just spelled out. So I think it's code. I think it's code. A lot of pizza in there, right? We've been trying to tell people for a long time about this pizza stuff. I hope people are listening up now. But what do you guys think about the code language?
Well, like I said, I think the pizza is a big one. And it kind of confirms what, QAnon was telling us with Pizzagate. And remember how you talked about earlier, how they kind of just try to they try to blow up what's really going on by discrediting it. And I think that's what they did with that shooter on the actual pizza, site. Like, no, it's not true. Look at this crazy guy coming to blow that up. But yeah, I mean, it's there. The one thing I'm curious about, and trust me, I believe what is in those files happened. And I think it was 10 times worse than what they showed us. But the one thing, and this might be too conspiratorial of me, but I was like, why are all these guys leaving, even if it's encoded language, why are they leading a digital breadcrumb back to them? Like, why are they talking so freely, even if it's in code, on the internet? And you got to think that Epstein knows that his emails are hackable. Like, why are they doing this is the question I want to know.
Oh, yeah. I think that, again, it gets back to the cognitive warfare that's going on. I think that, it's because here, can I share a screen? I want to show you a couple things.
Absolutely, man.
Let me see here how I can do this.
If you
I'll
go
do
down
the whole,
to,
yeah, I'll do the whole screen.
okay.
Oh, wait. Oh, yes. Okay. Never mind. Yeah, that's good. Okay. All right. Let me get in here. So they're in the Epstein files. How do I hide this? Okay, in the Epstein files, it talked about two girls that were buried on Zorro Ranch in the Epstein files. So you do have a little bit getting mentioned as far as that goes. You've also got this where somebody's messaging Jeffrey Epstein talking about Alesia is a film director. She's working on a human rights VR movie. She's an actress, an art expert, has business ideas. All of them are smart, high energy, and great. Jeffrey Epstein answers back to this Masha Drakova and says, your friend Aleza told me about the project she's doing, researching a really bad guy that gets children for sex sent to his island. She almost fainted when I told her that person is me. So, I mean, this is in the Epstein file. I went and found this to make sure it's real before I talked about this on here, because this was on social media, and I like to make sure before I sit here and espouse it, it's real. So this is either the FBI planting things in here, because again, it's the revelation of the method, the whole idea of just cracking people's skulls open just so they will just get rid of their country, as we know it, or it's real things, right? But there's no way for us to know. We just know it's in there. But this is pretty telling. I mean, that's straight to the point.
So some of these are so detailed and so niche and specific, and I can pull one up in a minute as an example, that I simply think that this is two people having a conversation, and it's real. Like, these were real relationships, I think. So I'll show one here in a second, and this one's interesting because it's got, actually I'll pull it up now. But there was a Hollywood chick in this one you just showed, right, Andrew, or film chick or something like that.
Yeah.
I was looking at this girl who is let me find her name. It's Siegel, and she is some sort of a film.
Yeah, Peggy
person.
Siegel. She's practically the gatekeeper for Hollywood. You know what I mean? I mean, you got to get the okay from her, and she speaks very, very dirty about people that aren't Jewish. Oh my!
So check this out, and this is one that I mean, my gut, my instinct, my feeling on this is that this is real because, like I said, I think these people had real relationships. I think Epstein really had relationships with these people, and some of these are actually real emails, because I just don't see some spook in a basement somewhere in Afghanistan or whatever, right, typing this up.
Yeah.
Off the top of his head. Some emails, yes, for sure, but not ones like this. So anyway, this is this chick, Peggy Siegel.
Zoom in for me if you don't mind, just so I can.
Yeah. Absolutely, bro.
Thank you so much.
She says, David. So this redacted a little bit. She's got two people included here. She's got Jeffrey Epstein and somebody else who's redacted. Some guy named David. David, you're right off the coast of Jeffrey's private island called Little St. James. He has Richard Branson coming too. He wants to invite you to come on shore and see his compound. Alan Grubman says you're both funny and smart, and I agree. Don't cry for me. I'm having lunch at Martha Stewart's in Connecticut. We'll try not to eat the fattening stuffing. See, this is so specific. Like,
Yeah.
I think this is, but anyway.
I mean, but she says worse than this. She talks about, I'll bring you kids back.
Oh, I'm going to show you that one.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, she's psycho, this lady.
Yeah, she is. I'll show you one more of hers in a second. But anyway, I just want to show this because this shows how, like I said, this is the behind the scenes world. This is how weird it gets. She goes, we're going to, after Martha Stewart's, we're screening Saving Mr. Banks in East Hampton Friday night, and Sandy Galen is doing dinner. We have Hugh Jackman and Matthew Broderick leading a sing-along to Mary Poppins songs. Jealous? And then she goes, happy Thanksgiving. If Tom Hanks is around, tell him his Walt Disney was a big hit. And it's just like, what are these people do? Is this what they do on a Tuesday night?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
This is something I brought up in my show. I just, there's something about this. It's just it smells so bad. Mm-hmm. Why is there so many equal signs and typos? And why is this so consistent throughout all of the emails? It'd be one thing if it was like one or two emails. All of the emails from multiple different people have these same typos and equal signs and signs. I agree with you. There's no spook in a basement, but there's their AI possibly making some, I don't know, emails. I'm just wondering. This is, I don't know. It's a little crazy. I get it.
Actually, man, that's a really good question, because I was wondering about that too. I thought it was Epstein just being, he's not as smart as he thinks he is. He misspells a lot of things. I was just assuming that he was including these as typos or something. But
well, this one's from Peggy, but you got some from Jeffrey with the same typos, and you have some from other people with the same typos. And I'm like, none of these people know how to type or have any proper grammar. It's kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, that's super weird, man. Here's the one with the babies you're talking about. On a plane now with Maddie. We're about to take off for Amsterdam in the morning of 19.
Wow,
Let's
no
see.
typos. Look at that. No typos. That one's probably real.
On
Just
Sunday
playing.
morning, we fly into the. So she's talking about going into Africa here. We fly into the bush to Cotter's camp in the Masai Mara, then Sasab, then to Lamu, and back January 4th. We cannot thank you enough for yet another life experience. The Maasai warriors don't eat it. If they don't eat us, the pirates from Somalia will. Coming to PB to see you in January, taking photos. We'll have a ball and think of you all the time. Can bring a little baby back for you or two, boys or girls. So Madonna.
So Madonna. And she talks about Madonna pretty dirty in another
And is it
email as well.
Isn't Madonna also connected to like some orphanages somewhere that they've been accused of stealing children in whatever country they're in?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, what are these people really up to? Why is this? I forget what her position is, Peggy Siegel, but like you said, she's a gatekeeper of some sort for LA for the film industry. What is she doing? Taking a tour of Africa and
Yeah.
having
Well,
access to babies.
what is she doing with Epstein? Like, what does she get out of this whole deal unless she's literally just a vessel that's being possessed by a demon and carrying out their will? Like, how does she get tied into all of this? Is what I'm curious about.
I think they're pretty close, it seems like. I mean, they party together pretty often. He invited her to a party and she said no goyim, and he said no, there's gonna be a lot of goyim because these are smart bankers. It's fine, and she talks about Madonna and she says there's nothing like an old Jew hater that's now on our side because she, I don't know if you know this, but Madonna practices the Kabbalah. So there's a lot of that kind of going on in there. Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, so I have an idea about that because remember, they're going to use this drop for their intended purposes. And if, like I said, I think Epstein worked with all of these, intelligence agencies, but he seemed to have a special relationship with Ehud Barak. And I think even before that, there was like 100,000 emails between the two of them that were, hacked and they were released to the public. And if if they wanted to keep his connection to Mossad and some of these Israeli PMs, how come they released all these Epstein files about Goyim, right? I mean, to me, when you read that, do you know what the reaction was? I mean, Candace Owens the next day, good morning, Goyim. And that seemed to be, the topic of conversation, alluding to this idea of Jewish supremacy. And I'm not saying that he wasn't practicing that, but I think that was very interesting that if you're trying to hide his connections to this, why did they release it in this drop? And blank out certain things like that.
Are the Epstein files too good to be true? That's kind of what we're alluding to here. We have a blackout period from 1999 to 2003, right in the middle of the 9/11 period. But then you have after that him asking Ghislaine if she wants to be on the 9/11 Shadow Commission, but we don't have any actual activity to verify what was going on during that time to give context to what he was doing. So we have this too good to be true situation that just stacks up. Pizza, grape soda, anything referring to food is left in there. Oh, 250 barrels of cyanide happened to be brought to Zora Ranch. Maybe there was 2 bodies left there and buried. It's too good to be true. And a lot of it could be real. And that's the beauty of it. Every good psyop has some truth in it, right? Every good psyop has a justifiable cause, at least to an extent. QAnon for 10 years, there was mimetic warfare going on from the Trump administration through 4chan from Fort Braggers like General Flynn, who were running QAnon ops. And now you have people like Ian Carroll with the controlled narrative drops of conspiracies nowadays who have ties to these guys. And I think that we're looking at this next phase of what we saw develop then. And what was that? That was the psychological manipulation of people into believing that, which might be partially true, but believing that there is a cabal of baby eating pedophiles that run the world. And we gotta change everything. I mean, something's got to give. And that's probably very true. Just like there really is Muslims and really is Somalians and really is, a man who got probably shot, a Christian martyr. But what are we going to use for the reaction and for the problem reaction solution? That is what we got to always walk down. What do they want me to do here? Do they want me to, So, yeah.
Yeah. And I like that you guys aren't totally trusting of this. Believe me, I do. I do. And I'm not naive, at least hopefully I'm not naive, but I do think that some of this is real.
Oh yeah,
There's 3 million of them.
it
I
has
don't
to
know
be
if you could
real.
fake all of that, right? And this is just me. I'm glad we have this. We're coming at this from different angles. This is good. Somebody out there listening is going to relate more to what one of you guys says than they will to what I say. And I think that's great. It's good to have these kind of discourse, if you will. But I think that of everybody, this is something I do think that's real. Just by watching his life and seeing different pictures and different, reels of footage and stuff. Everybody above a certain tax bracket who's also famous seems to be connected to this guy. I mean, there's an email where Epstein is trying to get Leonardo DiCaprio non-US product endorsements. Very just specific random stuff, right? But there's Leo. He's connected. You had Hugh Jackman in that one. You had, and this lady, the Siegel lady, one of the things I've noticed about her and her emails, she loves to name drop. She loves to wear it like a badge. Like, I am this big important heiress in LA. She wears it like a badge of honor, and she's always name dropping. And you see Tom Hanks mentioned in there, and Hugh Jackman, and all these other people in some of her other emails. So I just think that that network is real. I think, what is it? It's the George Carlin thing. It's a big club, and you ain't it. Well, they're the club. I do
Oh
think that
yeah.
that part's real.
Oh, hey, listen,
And by the way, Tom, sorry man, but Tom
yeah,
Hanks, how sketchy is he? We've been saying that for years too. So
yeah. I know. I think a lot of the emails are real. I just think it's what are they redacting and what are they releasing to us, and I think that that is all part of the plan. But the one thing I took away from this is because when you start looking at like the 3 million emails that they did release, and it just there's such a variety of subjects and topics and relationships that Epstein had. And I almost wonder if it's like they sacrificed the pawn to protect the king. And I think this operation is still going on. I think that there's major players involved with it. I actually think Trump is definitely involved with it. He's a major player in it. He wasn't just a friend of Epstein. Let's not forget that he was mentored by Roy Cohn, who was big in blackmail. That's where he learned all this from. And then he moved on to be friends with Epstein in Florida for about 10 years. And then they just had this huge fight. And, the QAnon folks will say, well, he was just blowing the whistle on Epstein because he didn't like what he was doing. No, no, for 10 years, he was partying with Epstein. He made jokes about Epstein liking young girls. He was friends with Ghislaine Maxwell. In fact, I even think, didn't he buy her dad's old yacht where they were doing a lot of the spying on it?
Yes.
So, well, the one thing that I think is fake is that now that Epstein's dead, is that this network does not exist anymore. And I think that's quite the opposite because in order for Epstein to handle all this stuff and run a full-time pedophilia, network, the infrastructure would have had to been huge, way more than the few ragtag people they put around him to actually operate this. So I think that's where a lot of the, delusion is that, hey, we got him now, nothing to worry about. No, this still exists. And I think it's bigger than we actually think it is.
yeah,
Oh, that's exactly right. Yeah, yeah. No, go ahead.
you go. No, you go.
Well,
You're
at the
up.
beginning of this, we preluded everything with his connections to all this stuff, and I do not deny that at all. But I think that I think this is being it's a useful thing. It's a useful information drop to coax us into a certain reactionary state. And so I'm trying to use my critical thinking just enough to understand, like, okay, are all the like that's why I'm looking at, is this in the files? Let's just get that down first. Define like what's in the files. Then what's in the files and like what are they trying to get with the files, right? So, and I just think that, like, because for instance, I've seen so many things that aren't in the files that if you go on social media, they're talking about DiCaprio, and cannibalism. I, couldn't find that anywhere. They're talking about, but he was in there. But you know what I mean? So they'll take things. So it's the discreditation of real things. And then you got to consider, what did they not drop? So what they didn't drop probably has all the stuff we're really trying to talk about that probably is real. But they're taking what they dropped, making fake stuff, discrediting what could be real, just to kind of, I don't know. I think that there's a weird thing to kind of discredit the vastness that Ben's alluding to with how big it is, and just kind of make it seem like just a one guy doing some wild stuff. He had connections, but that's about all it was. we're not going to get like that. But for people like me or conspiracy theorists, we're getting everything we want from social media if we don't go look deeper. And so I'm just saying, like, it just seems like there's some weirdness going on here where it's being used as some sort of psyop. So I just like to use it with caution.
Well,
I think that, it's kind of, it's just, I think there's so much that's not being shown.
yeah, and I'll tell you one thing. I think, just how these Epstein files came to the public was a psyop to a certain extent, right? Because who was the knight in shining armor that brought these Epstein files, and exposed them? Well, that was, what's his name? Thomas Massey.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And when you start diving into Thomas Massey, he was groomed in Demolay International, a Masonic boys organization named after the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, Demolay. You have Roy Khanna, who's up in San Francisco and definitely beholden to these big tech oligarchs. I mean, how do you think he got nominated and get some money to do all that kind of stuff? So I think even from the beginning of what they showed us was all part of the plan, right? We're not seeing these things because any justice is being served. In fact, by the letter of the law that, they wrote in Congress through Thomas Massey, those 3 million that they're withholding from us fall within the parameters of the bill they passed. So you can thank Thomas Massey. And I'm not sure we want to see those pictures or that evidence. It's just a bunch of, PDF stuff all over the internet. But even that part, I believe, was all controlled.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you brought up the Templar connection with Massey. So speaking of secret societies, now's my chance. I'm gonna throw this in. This is one of the emails.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is. Oh, you know about this one? Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, so Zodiac Society. Okay. I went through and I did some homework on this one. It's very specific here. I'll just kick it off. Got a note from Bob Pyrie, who asked me if I thought Murray Gell-Mann would make a good candidate for the Zodiac. As you know, it's one of those last secret type societies. The Zodiac is one of the really cool ones. They are 12 members at only one time, and it is still very secret. They do really cool stuff, but mostly since they are very old, just dinners and exotic locations. I can't tell you all the 12 members because I don't know who they are, but I know Paul Volcker is one, some guy named Howdy, whose family owns Stuyvesantville, Bob Pyrie, and I think Tom Brokaw. Brokaw represents Cancer, the sign, not the month. You are a member until your death, but if you get senile, they put you into eccentric orbit and not invite you to meetings, etc. Anyway, the only way to get in is if somebody dies. There are obviously no minorities or women involved or allowed. So, there's a little bit of racism for you. Anyway, let me know what you think. Finally, leaving West Africa tonight. Let me know when you get your postcard. You hopefully will laugh a lot. Okay, so I looked into all the people in this. I think this is interesting, right? Because some of the things that are said in this email do check out where it says you are a member until your death. All the guys mentioned here are all pretty much dead except for Brokaw. Bob Pyrie, he was these are like New York guys too, right? Like Epstein's a New York guy, right? Bob Pyrie, he's a lawyer, went to Berkeley, lived in New York, said he died in 2015. This email came out 2010, FYI. Murray Gell-Mann, American theoretical physicist, died in 2019. Paul Volcker, chair of the Federal Reserve, big fish here, another New York guy too, died in 2019. Brokaw, who's not dead, is 86. So, and I'm assuming what's happening here is that Epstein is not in the group, but has some sort of sway, and he helps them pick who's next. When one of these guys dies off, Epstein is like, okay, here, Epstein's the New York Connect, right? So, Stuyvesant Town is a neighborhood in Manhattan. So all this checks out, and I think this one's real. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
I think this really illustrates that they all know each other. It's a big club, and also the New York City angle of this. Epstein had various types of NYPD uniforms in his closet, so I think it's possible that he was having one of maybe his cronies use those to get places in the city, maybe that factored in with their trafficking network. Maybe Epstein himself put on NYPD and uniforms and impersonated an officer. So I'm not sure about all the details there. But I'll cap it off of that and see what you guys say. But while I'm finishing up with this thread here, let me just show the picture of the NYPD uniforms that he had in his closet. So, what do you guys think?
Yeah, yeah. I looked into that Zodiac Club. There's one book that somebody found in a museum. It was in the J.P. Morgan Library, in New York, which I think that explains a lot of the New York ties. Epstein worked for J.P. Morgan after the place that caused the 2008 financial crisis. It was like Brown something. God, what was it? He worked Brax something. He worked for that big venture, like huge company that in 2008 they went bankrupt, and that's what caused the whole thing, which happened.
Solomon Brothers.
No, it was called
Bearstein.
Bearstein. And this is when he was in jail the first time in Florida. That's when the 2008 market crash happened, because he had bonds that he did this weird thing in 2008 where he had a lot of bonds, and it's very much like fiat currency. He would get $138 million worth of bonds, and he would actually give them away for billions of dollars, like $1 billion worth, right? So he would get, charge that much to get it back, kind of like fiat currency. Well, he ended up cashing in all those bonds at once, which pretty much crashes the banks, right? And crashes all kinds. And so when he did that, that was kind of the catalyst for the 2008 financial crisis where they went bankrupt. And he was like, oh, I was in jail. Like he had nothing to do with it. That was exactly really why that happened. So, but other than that, afterwards, he goes and works for JP Morgan. And I believe that probably could be partially the connection with the Zodiac Club, if JP Morgan's library is where you would find information on said club.
Is there any idea what they do at the Zodiac Club?
12 brothers, each one's named after a zodiac, and 157-year-old secret society plotting and scheming the end of the world.
I wonder if there's any ties to the Zodiac killer.
I thought that too.
You know what? Somebody mentioned that
because of that book, right? So there's a lot of ideas that these serial killers that they present out to us in the public,
yes,
they're just a patsy, and it's really a network of these elite guys that are going around killing. No, swear to God, they're going around killing everybody. And they blame it. I mean, I even read something about that's what people thought Jack the Ripper was. And when did that take place?
Yeah. And that's what Sherlock Holmes was based off of. If you go watch the movie, what's going on in the first Sherlock Holmes? A satanic ritual is going on in a woman, and he just like stops it before she dies. That's literally what this whole theory is. And by the way, Henry, just to give it a little bit more credence, you have Son of Sam, who says he comes from like a orphanage, like with satanic, origins, and he only kills during like the dog star time in the summer, which is like Sirius, which is, goes back to the satanic like star or whatever. Mm-hmm. And by the way, you have Henry Lucas, who he killed his mother. She was a satanic witch who would abuse the shit out of him. She said, I'm going to make you my slave. He kills her, goes to prison for 10 years, gets out early. I believe that he's the only person Bush didn't give the death penalty to. He gets out and then he's killing again. And he actually said that he went and gave the cyanide to the people at Jonestown. And, if you know anything about, the theories about Jonestown, that wasn't just a cult. That was a place where they were training Manchurian candidates through MK Ultra studies. And so there's a big tie with all that. And I think that there's some credence to that.
Interesting. You know what I found really interesting, and actually gave me a lot of validation, and proud that I never, promoted Bitcoin to anybody. But when you, but when you start diving into it, and when you find out that 3 of the 5 developers were under the thumb of the Epstein network, and then you kind of see how that kicked off this idea of a digital currency into the psyche again. And then what comes after Bitcoin? Well, then you got your stable coins. And I think these are all stepping stones to the eventual collapse. But what are they going to replace it with? A CBDC at some point, or maybe they keep stable coins the whole way. But it is interesting that from its inception, that they had, Epstein had his hands, or the network behind Epstein had their hands in all of the digital currency. And what does digital currency really do? Especially the blockchain. It controls what you can spend your money on. And there's a ledger of everything you spend your money on. Right. So, yes. I mean, digital currency, the minute we go full digital, and as weird as this sounds, that piece of paper with that all-seeing eye, right, stamped on it, is kind of our last bastion of freedom to what they want to replace it with, which is the digital currency. And then they were behind all of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And if I may, my biggest point with everything regarding Epstein is, why is this a psyop? Why are all the other things a psyop? What are they trying to distract you from? If all these things are distractions, what is it from? What are people not talking about? The biodigital convergence, the stuff that I talk about all the time with the blockchain mirroring your DNA makeup and the way your DNA works, as if they want to merge it with your DNA. If I may, real quick, one more time, I want to share this, because this is it right here. This is what I always say. It says, for the Epstein time, the government is purposely distracting society from the bioinfocogno biodigital convergence. Nanotechnology is really, I think, the basis of all this. We have the police state getting built up around us. Whether it's the Civil War situation, whether it's the overthrowing of our current government for a new one that instills this technocratic order, I think one way or another they want a technocratic order. The Internet of Things, everything is ready. We just need the catalyst to finally bring it in. And I think that these distractions might serve as that. So I always try to point back to the technological aspect of this, the technocratic agenda. Accelerationism is being brought in by this generational Nazis that we've been talking about, this international group. What is the purpose of accelerationism? Well, they espouse the patchwork system, CEO kings, possibly 10 of them. And here we are. And so I always try to point back to that. I'll be getting out of here in about 10 minutes. So I just wanted to kind of.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned accelerationism. What did the Epstein files do? They accelerated their whole agenda. And you're right, they are a distraction to a certain extent from the AI agenda. And we know that that is their end goal. So I think we have to view everything they're doing now through that lens, right?
Yes.
To try to make sense on why they released it. But, you hear a lot of people talk about like what happened also right afterwards. Well, Trump and Obama came out talking about aliens or something like that, right? Trump's going to make this alien disclosure. And I saw people talk about, well, this is just a distraction from the Epstein files. And I disagree with that a little bit. I think this is part of the whole agenda, right? So you got the alien psyop, you got the Epstein files. What else do you have in there? You have the AI.
And the Christian nationalist movement to bring in that
huge.
Universal religion, which Bluebeam always said they're going to bring in a universal religion once Bluebeam happens. You have the technology to do it. You say it's reverse engineered by these aliens. These aliens are really fallen angels. And here we go. We got a universal religion. This is the source of all the religions. And boom, done.
Yeah, I think go on.
And the divine feminine, but go on, Ben.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I really think the Epstein files were. And I remember when they dropped them. And I, for the longest time when, people are like the Epstein files and the binders, with nothing on them came out. And we were always talking about, at least, conspiracy theorists, compared to the people who are just waking up, like, you're never going to get them. You're never going to get them. But I always used to add the caveat that if you do get them, understand that's like game on, right? There's no turning back. That is going to be that, that snowball rolling down the hill, and the agenda is in full force, and it's multifaceted as well.
Yeah, man, there's a lot I'd love to comment on. First of all, I'll say accelerationism. Nick Land, that's a topic I'd like to get into on future episodes. Epstein being tied to, okay, you guys are on the heels of the Nick Land thing, the technocratic thing. I agree with that. I think that totally fits into this. And within that conversation, of course, we're going to talk about stuff like quantum and crypto and CERN and all that, everything technological. I want to say about the Bitcoin thing. I'm still looking into that. I find it very fascinating. I've seen the emails online, but when I went to try and find them on the DOJ website, they're not there. That doesn't mean that they're not real. That means, I mean, the DOJ could have went back and deleted those because it's Bitcoin after all. There's a lot of people in this administration who have big plans for Bitcoin. They would not want those emails out. I mean, that's money, like big money that they have wrapped up with that. So I just want to mention that. But I do think that the cryptocurrency thing, I think he was in the realm, I think, of those people. I think he was in that orbit, I should say. Epstein was. So that's interesting. So anyway, my point here is like he's connected to all this crazy stuff. 2008 financial crash, potentially Bitcoin, potentially 9/11. And also, from what I understand, there's an email between Epstein and someone named Bill talking about planning a pandemic. Again,
I
like,
saw some of
what
that.
are we?
Iran Contra, and that was my point on like, is it too good to be true? I mean, this guy, he must be the. I mean, it just doesn't even make sense why he would be the scapegoat. Why would they let this guy go down ever? I mean, he seems to be running everything, so it's almost like too good. I mean, not to say he wasn't heavily, but there was like, it's
Is
weird.
it too?
But
Is
yeah,
it
go
too
ahead.
good, or is it actually confirmation of some of the stuff that we've been talking about all these years, and
Yeah,
it's just hard for us to come to terms with it,
right. It's the
or something
revelation. Yeah, the
in the middle.
revelation of the method for sure. I think is a big aspect to it, where it's like, oh man. And also like we got to think about it this way. Like they said that the cameras were broken, and then they released a video, and the video had a minute missing. Then they released, and they know that that minute was missing. They're playing games, and then they released the full video with the minute missing. And it's like, you guys are with their head. You know what I mean? That's really what's going on. And Epstein in the Bannon interview, he said something very interesting. He talked a lot about Bitcoin, money, how their system's very similar to the body, and all these different things. And then he kind of kept talking about how he invests heavily in the unknown, the study of the unknown. And I think that's the quantum space. And then later on, towards the end of the video, he talked about how women have this uncanny insight into the world of the unknown. Like unrelated to what he was talking about earlier, but he mentioned the same word unknown. And I'm like, you're talking about the same study of the same place. And when you start thinking about women talking about waking up on a lab table in Zorro Ranch, and the fact he brought scientists there, and the Nazi ties we talked about, the genetic interest, the DNA, the fact that he has baby what is it called whenever they get looked at, ultrasounds. He's got ultrasounds in the files. So it's like, whose babies are those? You have a woman who said that she's told Epstein she wants to have children for him so he can use them for his whatever, his, rituals. So I don't know, man. I think that all
Hey,
that kind of comes together there. Yeah.
Prince Andrew's wife sent Epstein an email congratulating Epstein on his new baby boy.
Mom Donnie. No, I'm just kidding.
But I mean, like going back, like if we're going to go full circle and go back to the Nazis in World War II, right? Joseph Mengele, the Fourth Reich, so they say that sprung up in secret in South America. There's all these programs. They had breeding programs. Hitler was very involved with breeding programs. They were, and I've had people clash with me online and say that this is not correct, but I'm going to say it again anyway because I think it is correct. The Nazis were drawing inspiration from our eugenicists. It
Yeah,
wasn't
like
just out of Britain. I mean, it was the Huxleys, but there was a
right.
American eugenics movement that popped up in America in the
They funded
20s.
it. Yep.
The Nazis were all about that. They were following that closely.
Very. Yeah, we were very interested together on the eugenics
Mhm.
program. Again, with the Prescott Bush, he went there. He was in the Skull and Bones, goes there, meets with Thule Society members, helps fund the Nazis and the Bolsheviks. I think, yeah, again, you mentioned the Nazis at the beginning of this. I mean, you read my mind. I do think that's exactly what we're seeing. The Nazis, the soldiers themselves, probably not Hitler, but everybody there were used by the Zionists to build this, what we're seeing today, which is this Zionist order. And I think a lot of the Nazis at the very top are Zionists. I think that's why Anna Paulina Luna's grandpa was a Nazi. I think Peter Thiel, he's helping kill Gazans and, everything else with Palantir, but he's got Nazi ties. So when you try to write this, it makes more sense that the Zionists worked through the Nazis. Maybe they didn't all know, but a lot of the ones at the top did, just like the intelligence agencies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Bilderberg, whatever you want to point at.
Man, I might have to talk to you again about the Thule Society, that meeting. Like, we don't have to get into it today, but I'd like to touch base with you on that later.
Yeah. You know what I also found interesting? You guys mentioned Prince Andrew. And, first of all, he got quote unquote arrested for 11 hours on his 66th birthday. Divided by 2, that equals 33. I just want to throw that out there. But, this is once again, I think, this idea of sacrificing a pawn to protect the king. Because who are they not talking about? They're not talking about King Charles and his ties to Jimmy Savile. Yes. And Jimmy Savile's ties to the royal family. And at one point, he was running the same gig as Epstein, right? But within England, he was the marriage counselor to King Charles and Princess Diana, but no one's talking like that. So I think part of the thing with these Epstein files, it was a little bit sacrificing the baton to protect the network that is still going on. And I think this, once again, this is an international network. and it's just full of Satanists. And as far as you're talking about the Zionists and the Nazis working together. Now, is one working through the other? I don't know, but they're all worshiping these fallen gods. But just look at the Havar Agreement. Once again, when was that signed? 1933. Surprise, surprise. And they essentially allowed, was it 60,000 of the richest Jews to move back to Israel and transfer 2/3 of their wealth?
Yeah.
And you would think that the Nazis and the Zionists in Germany at the time would be in conflict of each other. Not at all. And and what I also find interesting is actually, what was I going to say? I don't know, but go on with I think Andrew's got a couple minutes before he's got to go.
Yeah,
Yeah. Go ahead.
Andrew, you can finish up with or give us some finishing thoughts. I might stick around and hang out with Ben for a couple extra minutes after, but give us some final thoughts and plug your stuff, my man.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of funny, the World's Fair, where they showed us all this technology, to your point, Tim, earlier, where you talked about the Nazis connected with the technology. And then 1933, the signing of the Havar Agreement. We have the World's Fair, where they show us all this new technology, this new world that we're coming into. I think that all that kind of goes together as well. It's kind of interesting. But yeah, you can find me on all platforms at 6G Agenda. I've got a small, modest Patreon where you can get it, all the videos ad free, etc. It's pretty much free, one tier. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Thank you very much for having me. I'd love to do this again. It was awesome.
We'll do it again. This was great.
Great time.
Yeah, thank you guys. So hit me up if you want to come on anytime, by the way, Tim. And yeah, Ben, I'll see you around as well.
Yeah.
Okay, man. I'll make sure we're friends on Instagram today, and well, I'll touch base with you. Thanks again for coming on.
Right on.
Ben. So
Thank you.
I just want to say real quick that see the last thing you said was you talked about the international network tied in with what we know, Nazis. I'm so glad we got weave that in today. Side note there. But Satanists. So you're talking about this international network of Satanists. I'm on board with that. I wanted to ask you, what do you think about that in depth? Like, because I heard it was brought up on Joe Rogan. There's a guy he had on recently, and I just saw a clip of it, but he was talking about how the Epstein thing essentially is a Luciferian spell.
A Luciferian spell?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Lucifer, Satan, the worshiping of multiple fallen gods, whether that's Baal, Moloch. I mean, there's a whole pantheon of them. And I think that's what's driving them. And I think the reason everything's so tied together as far as manufacturing this prophecy, and I think we've touched on it before, is that these fallen gods that they worship, they want to be released from the pit prison. They want their final rendezvous with God. And I think that, I mean, like I said, I joked about, Peggy, whatever her name is, why is she doing that? Is she just possessed by a demon? But I think they all are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at some point, whether it's all the time, partial time, at some point, I think they're just vessels for these demonic offspring. I think everything initiates in the spiritual realm, and then it manifests in our earthly realm, our fleshly realm. And that's what we're seeing today. So yeah, that's what they are. And the thing is, they hide in plain sight. And what they want us to do is go, oh, it's all the Jews. Oh, it's this group. It's this group. No. The people who claim to represent your group, whatever you identify as, if they're in a position of power, more than likely they either represent a bloodline or they are that bloodline. And I think they're direct descendants of these fallen gods. At least that's what they believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if they're not always possessed by a demon or inhabited 24/7 by some sort of an evil spirit like that, there's definitely, I believe in that. Obviously, I believe in the spiritual realm. I think that we are very influenced by that realm as well, and I think that they're trying to have their way with us, and that ties into a lot of the stuff we read about in the book of Revelation. But yeah, whether they're always possessed or just afflicted or just occasional mouthpieces for something dark, I do think that's going on. And I think that they invite that stuff in with their, lack of a better term, low vibrational sort of way of life. I mean, that's one of the things I walked away with after looking at some of the pictures and some of the reels again. of these people and some of these emails, of course, is like these people just don't care about anything but themselves and money and power and getting ahead. They're all it's a milieu of people who just lie to each other, steal from each other, stab each other in the back, go out of their way to accrue blackmail on each other. It's just and it just gets darker from there, right? So these people, the way they live their lives and the things that they're hyper focused on is inviting, I think, negative spiritual forces straight to their doorstep.
Oh, I think I know I can't prove this because I'm not initiated in any secret society. I've never tried to join any secret society or anything like that. But I truly believe, and we'll just say the Masons, for example.
Mhm.
Everybody talks about how, every time you climb up, uh, a level or whatever, they initiate you a little bit more into the secrets, into the true knowledge of what they believe. And then they go to the 33rd, right? And that's when they reveal the big, the secret, right? Hey, by the way, that architect that we serve, that's Satan, right? So I think there's something about, and I think you find this in royal families too. Every time a king or queen is given their title or a princess is given their title, I think there's some type of ritual that goes
Mhm.
along with this where they actually invite a demon into their life.
Yeah.
Like, I can't prove that, but with all my heart, I believe that to be true.
Yeah. And you know how it is. You get on these shows and we go for like hour to 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours, and we do a lot of talking. And I try to keep what I say 100% legit. I really do. And if I don't, I'll probably come back and tell you guys later, hey, look, I changed my mind on that. Like it happened to me recently with something I said about, I did 2 episodes back to back where the flood was brought up. And in one of the episodes, I was entertaining the idea that the whole world wasn't flooded entirely. And then after that episode, I went back and read Genesis 7. I saw what it said, and I was like, think I was wrong about that. I think the whole world was flooded, and I think it annihilated just about every living thing other than whatever was on the ark, right? Well, my point here is I've said some things about this bloodline recently, and I've had a lot of people question me online about it. And this ties into what you're talking about with the Masons. There's a lot of stuff I've read. There's I'm not a Mason either. I'm not in a secret society of any kind. But I had a Mason give me some books that they keep amongst themselves for each other to read. And I read through those, and I have some other, we'll just say connections and ways of procuring information. And when it comes to these tablets I've talked about, um, I've talked about how there's a legend about Noah's children getting tablets after the flood. There's a legend about Tubal Cain and the line of Lamech leaving tablets and all that. That is stuff that I found out about it is taught to Masons in what they call the Blue Lodge. It's the first 3 degrees of Masonry. In the second degree of Masonry, they teach you this, that these tablets survived the flood. And it was a tradition of passing down this knowledge. So I just want to put that out there because I really do believe in that. I've read multiple texts that refer to these tablets. I think it was very real. And the sources that I've tapped that are people who are Masons say that that's exactly what you get in the second degree. Plus, if you know what you're looking for, if you know how to do your research, if you're good at digging, you can find that the first 3 degrees were published anyway. Just give you a
Yeah.
hint. Sorry
Oh,
about that tangent, but
oh no, I agree with that stuff. I mean, listen, we should pay attention to what we can find out about the oral history of masonry, right?
Mhm.
These are the masters of the universe. And when I say masonry, you can just throw all the secret societies in there. I use masonry as a framework. It's just easier to use. But yeah, I've heard that multiple times too, that this was knowledge that was bastardized before the flood, based off of the original knowledge that they gave Adam to tend the garden with. And then what was it? The evil Enoch, son of Cain, who the third Enoch is based off of. And we have kind of like the sacred sciences in those.
Mhm.
And then I heard that it was somehow survived the flood. And who was it? who said Hermes the magician is the one that found it with possibly Nimrod, and that's how they built the Tower of Babel.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, I believe all that stuff. I'm with you.
It's the legend. One of them is actually called the Legend of Enoch, and it goes into this. And let me just see if I can find something real quick that will make the point. There was some reason I brought this up then that I wanted to tie in with what you had just said about the Masons. And I forget the exact thing I
Oh,
want to tie in, but
I think I was talking about how at the upper levels or the highest level, that
mhm.
part of the ritual is inviting a demonic entity to become attached to you and somehow.
Yes. Yes. So I think this is stuff that's an example of stuff that has been passed down for a very long time through these traditions. And I think that they wrote this down and they put it underground, and these tablets survived. It's all over the place. There's a Freemason website here that I have pulled up, and in here they talk about a lot of instances of this. There was a tradition of the Talmudists that when King Solomon was building the temple, foreseeing that at some future time the edifice would be destroyed, he caused a dark and intricate vault to be constructed underground, in which the ark might be concealed. It's talking about the Ark of the Covenant, whenever such a time of danger should arrive, and that Josiah, being warned of Huldah, the prophetess, of approaching peril, caused the ark to be hidden in the crypt which has been built by Solomon. That's one example of a vault. Another one here that they're talking about. There was also in this vault, as in that of Enoch, a cubical stone on which the ark was placed. Okay, this is the same story. Sorry. There's a couple stories here, and I was going to try to give people an example of them. Here you go. The most curious story of one of a vault is told by Nicephorus Callistus, a Greek historian of the 14th century, in his ecclesiastical histories, when detailing the events that occurred while Julian the Apostate was making his attempt to rebuild the Temple of Jerusalem. He narrates the following. When the foundations were being laid, as has been said, one of the stones attached to the lowest part of the foundation was removed from its place and showed the mouth of a cavern which had been cut out of the rock. When he got to the bottom, and I'm just going to skip over this because this is a lot longer than I thought. But anyway, this guy goes down into this cavern of this vault, and when he gets to the bottom, he's got water up to his legs. He's searching the cavern on every side. He's found touching with his hands that something of a quadrangular form. When he's returning to the mouth, he discovered a certain pillar standing up scarcely above the water. Feeling it with his hand, he found a little book placed upon it and wrapped up very fine in clan linen. Taking possession of it, he gave the signal to the rope. Let me just skip ahead. What is in this? When the book was unfolded, not only the Jews but the Greeks were astounded, for even at the beginning it was declared in large letters, "In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God." So, my point is that there's example after example after example of this. People going out and doing these Indiana Jones type things in real life, and they
Yeah.
actually find this stuff, and a lot of it's pre-flood knowledge. This was pretty cool because this one they found, the beginning of Genesis from the Bible down in one of these vaults. I don't know, man. I just thought it'd be interesting to touch on that today because a lot of the stuff you talk about and that you've alluded to, and I've had multiple shows with you now,
Mm.
and a lot of it goes back to this fallen angel thread and the Nephilim and all that. And I just think that this information has been with humans for a very long time. And it's been stored in these vaults. And thus, a small amount of people have had access to it. And usually those are the occultists who facilitate the bloodlines.
Yeah.
That's
That
why
is
we
it.
don't know. It's why the public has no idea about this. But it's a tradition of keeping knowledge that they've withheld for thousands of years, and it's the small group of people at the top who know about this. I imagine this is how you get a Clinton emails where they're talking about the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh and the Nephilim. How do they know about that? Well, they're not necessarily reading the Bible, or the book of Enoch. It's because it's been in their bloodline for all these years.
Yeah, it's interesting. I am rewatching all 8 seasons of the Game of Thrones. And as
Nice.
far as these occult groups who inspire or kind of control the bloodlines, that is front and center. There's
Mm.
this witch that serves the Lord of Light, and she's in the ear of the king and kind of controls everything that he does through this occult knowledge that she has of the Lord of Light. So it's really interesting that you say that. And I think that shows in all that, throughout history. But one thing I did want to touch upon,
Sure.
speaking about Enoch and this idea of, these world leaders or these, major players are possessed by demons. And when I read this, I was like, man, this makes so much sense. And it just strengthened my belief that these people are controlled by demons. And this is actually from Enoch 15, when it talks about the evil spirits or the unclean spirits. And it goes right here. Because as you know, God wouldn't allow the spirits to go up into the heavens, right? And he condemned them or made them roam the earthly realm until the end of it. And look what it says right here in verse 11. And the spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth and cause trouble. Now, if that doesn't explain the ruling class of the entire world, I don't know what else does. Like,
Mm.
full stop. Like,
Yeah.
every single thing that just hit at, I can look at all these world leaders and go, check, check, check. They are really waging war against us, right? And it's all of humanity. And they try to, break us down into tribes. So we point to the other as they're the ones that are oppressing us, or it's this group that's oppressing us. In reality, it's these occultists. It's these descendants, I believe, whether it's real or not, I can't prove it. The descendants of these giants that are, just carrying out the order of their fallen angel parents.
Yeah, absolutely. It's divide and conquer, like you said. See if I can find it in here. It's what mainly P. Hall referred to as, well, he likened it to ceremonial magic, but done at a state level. He called it, priestcraft and stuff. He says these priest magician governor elect of Egypt were doing this to the population. They were moving them around like pawns on the chessboard, manipulating them, getting them to infight and all this. So he says, by establishing a sacerdotal caste, they usurped the position formerly occupied by the initiates and seized the reins of spiritual government. Thus, black magic dictated the state religion and paralyzed the intellectual and spiritual activities of the individual. The pharaoh became a puppet in the hands of the Scarlet Council, a committee of arch sorcerers elevated to power by the priesthood. It's been going on since ancient times.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens in Game of Thrones even more. I mean, part of the joke is it doesn't matter who the king is, it's the people who surround themselves, who
Yeah.
surround them. That pulls real power. And I think that's what you have today. I think Trump, I think Netanyahu, I think, you name a world leader, more or less they're just puppets, right? They're just, the front, the face of the control structure. But behind it, the real power are one that priest class, and I think the priest class, controls the bloodlines, so like you're saying. But yeah, I mean, it's right there, and
Right there.
but it would make sense, right? Because what is this? It's a spiritual war. So it would make sense that the people who are in connection with these spirits who are waging war against us would have all the power.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, we can bringing it to a close here. I think this is something that's probably going to be imperative for us to keep in mind going further into this disclosure movement. That this is priestcraft, and these people have big plans for what they're going to tell the public and what they're not going to tell the public. And I think, speaking of infighting, I think there's some infighting going on right now with
Oh, big time.
how are we going to direct, which way are we going to go with this thing. I think they're at a fork in the road, and I think, I don't know what's going on here, but with Trump, sending out this truth social message that he's going to, begin releasing the alien files or whatever he called them. I think this probably throws a little bit more chaos in the midst for them. I mean, let's face it, he is an agent of chaos. Like that's kind of what he does. You go back to 2020 and see what happened at the tail end of his first run as president, not run, but 4 years. We spiraled into total chaos
Well,
as
I mean, real
humanity.
quick, that's why I voted for him. I think that's why everybody voted for him in 2016, because we were just over the status quo and we're like, hey, just throw in this guy to just destroy it and talk a lot of crap while he did it.
Right, right, right. I think, yeah, some people don't see it as chaos, and they certainly didn't in the 2016. They saw it as draining the swamp or
Yeah.
whatnot, like something different, so change. Which I understand that. I understand why people voted for him both times. I do. I
Mhm.
do understand it because they did want change. But I think what people expect and what actually goes on with some of these administrations is two totally different things. So
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see. I'm
Yeah.
trying not to get political, man, because we just had a great show, and I'm trying not to end it on politics. But
Well, let's
I
do the
just,
aliens. You want to do the aliens?
yeah, let's end it with aliens. But I
Yeah.
just want to say, in regard to that, the day that Prince Andrew gets arrested, supposedly, or whatever's going on with that situation, that's when a couple hours later is when he says he's going to release the alien files. And I had to wonder about that. Is the heat on this administration that hard to where they needed a diversion or what?
Yeah, I don't think it's a diversion. That's what initially people were talking about, because that's what it looks like, right? Like, oh my God, the Epstein files, they're trying to detract from it. I was like, no, they're not. They released them so we could see them. They didn't have to release them, but they did. They wanted us to see them. So I view aliens, like I said, as part of the overall agenda. And how that looks, how that unfolds, I don't know. But I think right now is that they're planting the seeds, right? And they're going to describe these B'nai Elohim, and in this case, the rebellious B'nai Elohim, as aliens, right? And they're just going to, put it into the conscious right now. I think possibly they might use a little bit of Project Bluebeam leading up to their final return, with what they can do with holographs now. We know
Mhm.
Elon Musk is shooting up all these satellites in the sky, and from those things, they could do some crazy holographs. But I think ultimately, these rebellious sons of God are going to come back. I think they're going to say that they're aliens. That's where the psyop will be. And what I think ultimately they're going to do is this. I don't know exactly how this is going to look. I don't know if this is biblical, but just what I see possibly happening. They're going to go, hey, there's these other aliens out there, which I think they're going to, behind, closed doors, they'll tell you, no, this is, God, Jesus, and the loyal angels, right? But I think they're going to say there are these other aliens out there. They're to come and destroy the earth. But if we form a one world government, right, which is ran by AI to unify the people, guess what? We have a better shot of beating them. And oh, and by the way, we've been working with your government secretly for the past 60 years. And then that's where we're going to see this, explosion of alien tech more than just a video. And they're going to usher that in to, I think, trick us into fighting against God in the Battle of Armageddon.
I Yeah, yeah. Trying to figure out how I'm going to word this because I think you're on something. I think I think they're going to try to throw at us that there's two factions of aliens. They got to get us there first. Right now,
Yeah.
they're getting the public to a place of acknowledgement that this is a real thing. They're still working on that, but I could just totally see it going that way where they're going to say, "Oh, there's this group that's been working with us for the 60 years or whatever." Like you said, they're the good ones. They're going to help us in this battle against the bad ones. And all along, like you're saying, a lot of this is being worked out through this new AI governance. Well, which faction is going to be speaking through the AI? That's going to be a whole nother layer of deception added to this. Yeah, and I mean in some of the old you get into some of these old accounts of people talking to apparitions, right? Especially female apparitions and the Templars and stuff like that. She says, I am going to help you in the end. I'm going to help you battle the forces of evil. I'm going to help you defeat Satan, who is Jehovah. And I slam on the brakes. I'm like, hold on, what?
Yeah.
So you're going to help us fight against Jehovah, and you're calling him Satan? This is it's going to get
Gnostic.
wild. Yeah,
That's Mystery Babylon, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think it's all, and that's the thing is once you understand what the end goal is, you can start making sense of all the steps along the way. So I'm not one of those guys that think that, oh, aliens are fake. Well, I mean, at least what they tell us about aliens, but there's a lot of people that think, hey, there's no such thing as them. It's all made up and it's just a distraction. But no, I think it's an integral piece of the puzzle when putting together Mystery Babylon. Because I think at some point, and that's another thing, it's like the government can't come out with this, how long has the alien psyop been going on for? 100 years or so? Probably before that under a different name. But I mean, from Roswell all the way back,
Since 47 for sure.
since 47, right? And you said that's an integral year in the whole history of all this and kicking this stuff off. That if they don't pull something within the next, 5-10 years or whatever it is, at some point, like the American people will just not believe it at all. It's like crap or get off the pot at some point.
Yeah, the whole yeah, and I'm with you. I think the modern day UFO, we'll just call it a movement. The thing that's built has been building up this whole time to get us to the disclosure movement. That started in 1947, and it was a bunch of guys. The people who brought this in were all pretty much in their own way practicing Mystery Babylon religion, or should we call it occult rites and rituals. That's what L. Ron Hubbard was doing with Jack Parsons. It's what Parsons was doing, of course, as well. It's what George Van Tassel comes along and does his version of it as well. Says he contacted an entity named Ashtar and said, we're going to call this the Ashtar movement. And they centered it out in the Mojave Desert, which was the same desert that Jack Parsons was doing his rituals to, who I would suggest is Ashtar as well, Mystery Babylon. And then you've got George Adamski a couple of years later who says he's also in a desert in California. It's funny how this is all in the same area. Says
Yeah.
he's contacted by another entity and it's from Venus and that represents the Venusians. Well, who's Venus? Venus is Babylon, goddess
Yeah.
Babylon. So that whole thing started out of people. They were doing Crowley magic. Thelema is based on this divine feminine.
Yeah. And also the Catholic Church or the Vatican is integral in this. I mean, the Pope has come out and said that he's willing to baptize aliens if they ever come to the Vatican. You see Pope Francis wearing that dress where it has the alien from the Naztec lines on it from Peru. And you're like, wait a minute, that's in reference to these fallen gods that ruled over us during the time of Atlantis. Why would the vicar of Christ, Christ represented on earth supposedly, and I say supposedly very loosely and jokingly, why is he having this fallen angel garb or alien, designs on his clothes? It's because the institutions are ushering this in. I think whether they know it's coming or if they're hand in hand working with these fallen gods, and maybe they're communicating with them behind closed doors, getting in touch with Ishtar or Ashtar, and they're giving them knowledge about when they're coming back and all that type of stuff. Yeah, I believe that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and I think it's referenced heavily in scripture. You have to go through and find it. You have to know what you're looking for. But you can start with Asherah because that's another name for this goddess, and that's all through the Bible. It's also in there as Ashtoreth, and I think it's also the goddess or excuse me, in the Bible, the whore of Babylon. Which I've said it before. I'll say it again. I think that whore didn't only have sexual um it wasn't only pertaining to sex. It was pertaining to a priestess who they would engage in sex magic, but it's also somebody who would engage in all types of other magic and divination and uh channeling and all that stuff. This was so it's in the Bible, in the ancient world. I think what it says whore of Babylon is saying priestess of Babylon, and this is the priestess, the
Yeah.
top witch of all
Well,
time that they're referring to.
Ishtar? Well, this is also interesting as far as, the Vatican kind of leading the charge of this alien psyop and the bringing back of the divine feminism or Ishtar worship, right? What's Ishtar also called? The Queen of Heaven. What do they call the Virgin Mary? The Queen of Heaven. They already have you praying to a deity that they created under the same name as Ishtar. They already have you praying to the saints or dead people, which we're not supposed to do. So, this has been a long time coming, and they have to kind of like break down, biblical Christianity, to kind of bastardize us to make it a stepping stone into this ultimate mystery Babylon, where I think these, aliens, for lack of a better word, but these fallen gods are going to return. Probably Ishtar will be one of them,
Yeah, yeah,
and the transition will be smooth.
yeah. I think that that's what's mentioned in some of the latter books of the Bible. I mean, obviously Revelation, and I think Zechariah. Uh, shout out to Stephen from Biblical Hitman. He showed me a verse recently. It's Zechariah 5, and it talks about the. It's talking in a way. Okay, so it says that Zachariah he's a prophet, of course, right? So he's seeing a vision or whatnot, and he sees a lady that's in a basket, and the archangel with him closes the lid of the basket essentially and says, "She's wickedness." And these two angels come down, and they carry the basket off, and he goes, "Where are they going?" Zachariah asks, "Where are they taking this woman?" And the angel with him says to the land of Shinar, to put her on a base, to set up basically like a city is what it's referring to, and that's Babylon. So I think right there in Zechariah 5, you have the partly at least the origin story of this. And that's when I think that when you read Babylon, Whore of Babylon in the Bible, it's referring to this. Something that was the priestess of Babylon, which throughout the ages, meddles in other affairs and that sort of thing. And I'll just say this. I mean, I love my Catholic listeners. I appreciate you guys. Never trying to come down hard on you. I think I'm not a big fan of the Vatican. I'll leave it at that.
Hey, listen, I'm with you on that too. It's like, understand we're talking about the institutions, right? So like and listen, I'm Jewish, right? I'm a Jew for Jesus. But when I talk about Israel, and the control structure there, I'm not talking about all Jews. In fact, I'm not talking about the majority of Jews. I'm talking about specific bloodlines that have set up these institutions to control this. And I think you know, one thing I've noticed is that in the conspiracy game, everybody likes to call out every other group but their own. And I think there just needs to be a little self reflection and actually kind of dive into the history of these institutions, dive into the messages that they're trying to teach us. And if that coincides with anything biblically. And when you start doing that, you realize that, I mean, at least my opinion, I think all institutions are corrupted. I think anything with four walls to be this sole representative of biblical scripture, I think is a lie, especially when you take into consideration our bodies are the temples where the Holy Spirit resides. And I think that the body of Christ is a spiritual one. And all these institutions do is divide it, have us find, differences everywhere else except finding commonality in Christ. Right? I mean, I think Christ should be the great unifier.
Yeah.
And the fact that these institutions are dividing us, I think speaks volumes of the institutions. And then again, hey, listen, if that's where you find your community and if it's a vehicle to take you to God, I mean, I'm not going to hate on it,
Yeah, whether you're out there, you're listening, and I saw a great comment the other day where a listener said something similar to this. I think he said he was Pentecostal, and whether you're Catholic or Pentecostal or Lutheran or Episcopalian, let's have our connection point be Christ. Let's all come together on that and agree on that, and then let's let all these other issues reside beneath that, and let's have them be open for I don't want to say, let's have them open for discussion.
Yeah, don't let
Yeah.
it divide us. And
Right.
you kind of see that happening right now with this eschatology, right? Are we in Satan's short season, or are we still in the premillennial reign? I guess the reign of Satan leading up to, we're still in the premillennial. I'm a premillennialist, right? So I don't think the millennials come. But have you noticed that within the conspiracy community, especially the Christian conspiracy community, the lines are drawn, and each side is saying that their belief system is of the devil. But you know what's really of the devil? Not their belief system, because Dr. Michael Heiser, who I love, says, hey, you can make a case for any one of these things. I think what Satan's doing right now is dividing us based off this eschatology. Like the eschatology and what institution you go to worship Jesus, and hopefully only, I would even say worship God the Father. Nowhere in the New Testament does Jesus ever say to worship him.
Mhm.
He goes to your Father, go to your bedroom and pray to the Father, right? So I think that should be our unifying thing, is God the Father, a Messiah, Jesus, and the rest leave up for debate. But there should only be one hill that we're willing to die on, one hill that might divide us from somebody else. And that's the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, if you ask me.
Yeah, man. And yeah, it'd be a good time for us to put aside some of these side arguments, like under the umbrella of let's have Christ up top, and then everything else, let's have it up for discussion underneath that. Let's not have that be a point of division for us right now, because we're going to need, it'd be nice to be unified going into this year. I mean, or going through the rest of this year, I should say. I mean, with what's coming right now with this alien thing. I mean, it's going to get wild out there. We need to have an open mind, and we need to be grounded. And the best place to be grounded is in the Bible and the gospel, and with Jesus at the center. It's the best place to be right now with all this crazy stuff coming out. And we can kind of end on that. I want to just maybe talk about this year, or what you maybe what you we don't have to do predictions, right? But what you see happening, because I think we've got at this point, so we've got I'm trying to figure out if I can put this in a timeline. I don't know if I can, but Easter, Easter, sometime around there is Bledsoe's semi prediction, or he says that when the Sphinx sees the star of Regulus, something to do with the lady is going to happen.
From
Yeah.
Bledsoe said so's.
Well, yeah, Chris Bledsoe said
Okay.
that. Yeah. Yeah, he's said it on several podcasts. And I saw a clip of him talking about this on News Nation recently as well. So we've got that, something possibly happening there. We've got this looming drop of alien files. We've got the Spielberg
Yeah.
documentary, and potentially an Obama documentary, because he started working on a documentary a couple years ago called White Mountain, to do with the Betty and Barney Hill abduction.
Mm.
Also very UFO related. So that's what, am I missing anything? Those are like four big things that we have
Yeah.
possibly happening.
So what do I think over the next year?
Yeah.
Well, on the Epstein front, we might have already covered it. I think the resentment towards the government and both sides, because both sides are implicated in this, from the American people, is going to boil and boil and boil. I think they might throw in a few more Epstein files that might appear somehow. They might release some more. But I think that's what they want. I think they want, and you'll see this, the American public becoming more disillusioned with the government every single day. And they're no longer, if you notice about the government too, they're no longer spinning things anymore. Um, they're just throwing it right in your face, and they're saying, we don't care what you say. The agenda is going forward, right? I don't know if you saw this today, but Trump, I mean, think about like the optics of this. Fresh off the Epstein files, right? Who is the public blaming for all of this, right or wrong? Israel. And he has Trump come in here. I mean, Trump had Netanyahu come in here, where he literally handed Netanyahu a quote unquote key to the country. Like, this is just a slap in the face. I think it's all done on purpose to get us really pissed off. So I think that's going to happen. And I think if they ever do release more Epstein files, get ready. As far as war goes, you know, Trump's already talking about them going into Iran again. And, you know, I always joke that somewhere in this tick for tack between America and Iran, Israel for Iran, we're going to wake up one day and the Dome of the Rock is going to be destroyed. And then cue the red heifers, cue the sprinkling of the ash all over the place. They're going to build that third temple, which has prophetic implications. And Alien, I think we're going to see a little bit of Project Bluebeam along the way before the actual aliens do return. So I don't know exactly when the aliens are going to officially return, whether that's before this war that they're setting up, whether they will come back maybe with kind of like the Antichrist at sometime in that time to bring peace to the world. Because, you know, there's all those alien, what I would call psyops coming out of the government that we all got into, how, you know, the UFOs would come down to nuclear reactors and they would turn them off. Or even with the Admiral Byrd, he went to the center of the earth and he met with that Nordic alien and he chose, you know, Admiral Byrd to, you know, go out and tell the people that they're going to destroy themselves through this and stuff like that. So yeah, maybe that happens. But yeah, I just think basically whatever the agenda is, and it's multifaceted, with the release of these Epstein files, going back to accelerationism, this was like a spike in the, you know, ground. This was a touchdown. Accelerationism is here. The agenda is here. Get ready. The only way we're going to get through this is be abiding in the spirit. And if you actually want to fight the agenda, you can't fight this physical one. You could fight the spiritual one. That's spiritual warfare, really, is spreading the gospel. And the demons are going to do everything they can to get us to go the way of the world, which are these psyops. When what we should really focus on is sharing the good news with others. And that's really what God wants us to do.
Yes, sir. I think I'm going to end it there because that's well said and encompasses everything. We came back and acknowledged that this episode was indeed about the Epstein files. We found our way here, but we wrapped it all together nicely. At least you did. And so I'm going to leave it at that, man. That's awesome.
All right.
Yeah. Great. I mean, I think it was a great episode. I had a blast. It was
Me
fun.
too.
So thanks again, Ben. I always love talking to you, man. And for people listening, I'll have Andrew's stuff in the description below, and I'll have, of course, Ben's stuff in the description below. But one more time, Ben, tell them where they can find you.
You can find me at End of the World News on Instagram, and you can find my weekly podcast on Spotify and iTunes there. You can find me at End of the Worlds with an S News on YouTube. And hey, always thank you for having me on your show as always. After this, I'd like to, if possible, lock down a spot to have you come back on mine, maybe in 3 or 4 weeks, and we can dive into it. Because, like I said, I think I first heard you. I don't know where I first heard you. Maybe it was on The Biblical Hitman or something like that. But I was like, man, I like this guy. He's got a kindred spirit in him, and that's how I judge people. Right? Is if in my eyes they have a good spirit, and you definitely do. So I always enjoy doing this.
Thanks, man. I mean, of course, man. Back at you, man. I'm so glad we linked up and we podcast together now. I mean, we just always get into amazing stuff, and it's always genuine. So, and I can appreciate that as well, my friend. So, yeah, we'll leave it at that, and I'm looking forward to coming on your show. Thanks for listening again, everybody. As always, break the mold, conquer the realm, and thanks for listening.